college admission officers, what is the worst reason you chose not to accept a student? Just graduated college last summer, worked in the undergraduate admissions office for 4 years as a student ambassador, tour guide, shadow host, etc., and as an admissions counselor's assistant. Worst case I've seen is a kid openly admit in his application essay that he was a habitual cheater throughout high school, but it taught him how to become resourceful and think outside the box. I've never seen an application get denied faster. One of my friends wrote her application essay to Harvard about how she really loves ice cream. It was a long shot. She wasn't trying to be deep, just figured she would write about something she likes. And she got in. I'm not a college admissions officer, but there is a scholarship in my area, provided by a business. It's an amazing opportunity and I never thought I would get it. Well, lo and behold I get it. The organization has a representative at my school, so I asked her why I got picked. She asked me what I wrote my essay about, and I told her I was at camp 1 year and I helped a girl with some serious problems. She then told me that both scholarship people and colleges have gotten to the point that they will turn you down if you write about how the mission trip you went on changed your life. They're sick of it. Freaking everyone goes on a mission trip, sees starving children and suddenly their life is changed. She says that they totally support missions and the things they do, but she also said, if you write about the mission trip you went on, you may go to heaven, but you won't go to Harvard. Obligatory, not me, but someone I know. I work in another department at a college, but I've heard some great stories from our admissions counselors. My favorite is one girl who was actually admitted. Then the department's social media person followed her on Twitter. Her profile picture was smoking a blunt in front of a pile of coke. Scrolling through, a very graphic picture of her fellating someone. Yeah, that acceptance letter got pulled real quick. Edit to add another one I just remembered. The person who submitted a handwritten essay from jail. Throwaway account for obvious reasons. I used to work at a college admission office and most applications with Asian names go into another pile regardless of grades. Anyone who tell you there is no discrimination going on has their head in the sand. Not admissions, but I work in an office on campus that gives out most of the financial aid benefits to students. Not in need students, but those applying for scholarships and fellowships and things of that nature. I've literally had to make 2 piles of applications, one for whites and Asians, and one for everyone else. The white and Asian pile is immediately thrown out, because our office assumes they have gotten money from other sources other than our aid. I've thrown out loads of great people to meet a quota. I'm not saying it is right or wrong, but racism exists throughout the education system, for all races. It is just part of the system. Here's a fantastic story for you that ruined my feeling for colleges overall. When I was 18 I had just earned my private pilot's license and wanted to pursue the career of becoming an airline transport pilot license. Doing the logical thing, I applied to Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. About 3 weeks later I received an acceptance letter and was enthusiastic to the nth degree about this. I started planning my move to Florida to attend and what I was going to do, being so far from home, but making my dreams come true. A little more than a week later I received a phone call from the admissions office informing me that a mistake was made and that I wasn't accepted due to my math scores. I'm not great at calc. They told me that there probably wasn't anything that I could ever do to get into that college and that even attending a community college to improve it wouldn't matter, they would still reference this. I told the lady on the phone that I would still show up with my acceptance letter in hand and that I would gladly pay the yearly tuition in September. She laughed at me like the rude person she was and said that's not how this works and told me to have a good life and hung up. What a bitch. I remember being completely pissed off and decided that if this was how a career in aviation/college was going to be, I was just going to pursue my other passion. End of story. Fuck you Embry-Riddle. I'll keep my PASL gladly and wrap up my networking degree in a year or so. I've actually made it a point to share that story with anyone who has wanted to attend Embry-Riddle and made it a point to make sure they don't attend. Thanks for pissing in my Cheerios guys due to someone's mistake. I was in grad school and grad students have a huge say in who get admitted into this particular program. We have the prospective students stay with current grad students, so we can do some social things and feel out how they are as a person. I got this kid from a top flight university. On paper this kid was a stellar candidate, but he was such a pretentious asshole and a straight up loser nerd. That is saying a lot, this being grad school admissions. After he left I sent an email to the head of the admissions saying so in slightly, ever so slightly, nicer words. Got an email back that said yay, that guy seemed like a dick. We didn't accept 2 people that year. That guy was one of them. For being a loser. In grad school. I'm a teacher. One of the students I work with just had his acceptance to Stanford rescinded. He's a low-income minority student with an excellent GPA and ACT scores. On paper, he's a score for schools that value talent and diversity. So he got accepted to Stanford. When he got the letter, he tweeted at Stanford saying something like "fuck yeah, I got in." That prompted them to click on his Twitter, and they saw all this fucked up shit about misogyny and drug use. They called our school and told us that they no longer were interested in admitting him as a student. I know some schools will reject people if their grades are too high, they have too many extracurriculars etc. The thought being that these students are basically perfect and will probably get into an Ivy League school. What is the point of accepting them if they aren't likely to attend? My cousin attended sports science. His grades were all very good. But on the physical exam, it was stated that branded clothes weren't allowed. They had to wear a white t-shirt and black shorts without a brand. He didn't know and was wearing a Nike t-shirt with the logo showing very small on his shirt. He got sent away for disregarding the rules. My aunt was there and would get another t-shirt in the store immediately, but they didn't approve. So he didn't attend that university. Not an admissions officer, but this happened to a kid in my school when I was younger. 7 kids applied to Harvard and all were qualified. A rep came into town to interview them all at once. One kid gets a question. If you were stuck on a desert island and all you had was a power outlet, a TV/VCR, I'm old, and 7 videotapes, which do you ask for? The kid replies, truthfully, like an idiot, 7 pornos. He was the only one that didn't get in. One of the professors on the admissions board in my graduate program told me about a guy he interviewed who seemed very intelligent and looked great on paper. However, he noticed that there was something kind of off about the guy mentally. He just didn't seem like he was all there in the head. The professor begged the rest of the committee to reject him, and they agreed, since this particular professor was well versed in neuroscience and psychology. That student went on to become a PhD student in Colorado, where he opened fire on a full theater during a midnight showing of The Dark Knight Rises, killing 12. I'm an admissions counselor for all of our Chinese applicants, so you can imagine I get a lot of interesting essays, many of which look like they're either straight from Google Translate, or they paid a consultant to write something for them. One essay I read recently was from a girl who wrote about her experience volunteering in a nursing home. I thought this would just be the typical "I'm awesome because I made a difference" essay, but in fact, it turned into softcore porn. The girl began writing about giving an old woman a bath, whom she called her pet. She described in detail how she rubbed the skin back and forth, including the floppy crotch. Floppy crotch. Just imagine that visual. I have a story from the other side of this. Just finished high school. My grades were pretty meh, but I had gotten good scores on my SATs and ACTs and had received a few awards for speech and debate, so I figured I would be okay. Send out 6 applications in April, wait for the responses. First one comes back, rejected, not enough English credits. Second one comes back, rejected, not enough English credits. Same story with all 5, only got accepted to one that was out of state and had different requirements. I guess my school had fucked me and hadn't given me a curriculum that fit my state's college requirements, and I was going to have to apply to community college, take 1 class for a term, and transfer in the winter, which sounded all kinds of terrible. I focused in on the college I really wanted, called them up, and asked which credits I needed. Then I went to my high school advisor and asked them why I didn't have it and what I would need to do to get it. He was adamant I did have it, so I called up my school. This continued for several days, me calling up the same academic advisor at this college and trying to find forms she wanted with my high school advisor. Finally she just gave in and waived the admissions process and got it accepted on the spot. The funny thing was, I was the only kid I had met at that school who had such a terrible high school GPA, and my SAT and ACTs were well below the average at the school's admission page. If I had already had my English credits when I applied, I almost certainly wouldn't have gotten in. I pretty much annoyed them into accepting me. TL. Doctor annoyed the admissions office into accepting me into a much nicer school. Once, one of those college speakers at my high school told us this story when explaining letters of rec to us. One teacher wrote a letter for an extremely good student. She was kind, hardworking, got good grades, and she also babysat for the teacher. So obviously this teacher had no shortage of good things to say about this student. However, later on, after the letter of rec had been sent in, the college got a call from the teacher, who took back everything she said in the letter and told them to not consider the student. Why? Because she caught the student stealing from her house. The worst reason the student was rejected, or, the way the question is worded, the worst reason the admission officer chose to reject someone. The latter, take pile of applications, separate into 2 piles, throw half away. Those were the unlucky ones. When I applied to my college, I went in as an animal science major. I wrote my personal essay on how one day, while working at a spay and neuter clinic, a man came in demanding I help his dog. However, we were not a regular vet, so I denied him. He begged, so finally I went out to find his female pit bull biting her back right leg off, for she lost feeling in it. Turns out his 6 other dogs were biting it too. Immediately I called the doctor and we took her in. I was also allowed to watch her leg get amputated. When I went to get the man's information, he left due to the fact that he was scared of being arrested for animal cruelty. I took the dog in, taught her how to walk with 3 legs, and then found her a foster home. Now besides that, haha, this girl in my high school stole my essay and sent it to her schools. Because she wasn't thinking, she sent it to the same college I applied to. Admissions office called both of us, and I proved I wrote it. She was denied acceptance to every school she applied to. Needless to say, write your own stuff and you have a good chance of getting in. Not a conscious decision, but it mattered. I worked in student recruitment for a university. The student recruitment software did not handle non-standard names on an US addresses well. I had to run a bunch of SQL queries I had cooked up that caught all the out of format applicants, then try to rewrite their data so it wouldn't get thrown out. If I didn't, essentially, hand comb the database for these applicants, usually with non-Anglo names, they would not get university communications. Worked in a graduate admissions office in college. We once turned away a woman who would call the office every day to ask us questions about the program that we were not able to disclose. Average GPA/GMAT of class accepted so far. Job placement rate. This was a brand new program. The first class hadn't even graduated yet. For this year, etc. Eventually, we rejected her because her resume wasn't as built out as some of our other applicants. I guess this is different for grad school, though we did look at her application with a slight bias. She flipped a switch and actually came into our office to scream at us. I'm not an admissions officer, but a girl with perfect predicted grades way higher than the course she applied for required from my school was applying for neuroscience and was rejected from her top uni because she didn't take maths, which was a required subject. Turns out that this was the first year that the university had started asking for maths as a compulsory subject, and this piece of information isn't even included on the subjects page on their school website. We had a trustee visit campus with his son. His son was a nice kid, really well mannered, but just didn't have the grades. It's a really competitive school, only accepting about 25% of applications, and academically he wasn't even in the top 50%. The dad knew this and asked to meet privately with the dean. About 10 minutes later we heard shouts from down the hall coming from the trustee as he stormed out, cursing the dean and saying he was embarrassed to be an alumnus. The president's office was in the same building, and he sprinted up the steps and marched right into the president's office. About 15 minutes later, he was escorted to his car by campus security. The dean told us later that he had offered to pay his son's full tuition outright in addition to making a $500K donation to the general fund if we'd accept him. He was removed from the board of trustees by the end of that week. We had to mark his son as an ever in our databases, which means we can't ever consider an application from him again. Fuck, I'm just so glad I can got to university in Germany. All you have to do is enter your name and grades in an online form and you're in. Fun fact, for most large universities, admissions officers aren't making decisions. They punch your grade/GPA/test scores into a computer and it generates an admit/deny/waitlist recommendation automatically. It's called a recommendation because parents would cry if they thought a human wasn't personally reviewing their precious child's application. But the reality is that 95% of applications are only seen by the data entry crew. Basically what I'm saying is that you shouldn't be terrified of offending admissions and getting denied on a whim. Just have good grades.